Welcome to the Getaway Podcast, episode number 6. We launch in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. I'm the Mayor, Gary Boylan, here with Stephen Brooks, MLL All-Star.
Welcome to planet Earth.
So another great week, guys, another great week. I'll tell you what, if you haven't been hooked yet, I don't know what you're watching, or you're not watching, but these games have just been incredible. 1-2 goal games, nothing but success for the top teams, and then bang, they lose. So I think the game of the week this week, pretty obvious, Maryland, Ohio State. What do you think?
Absolutely. That was the top game of the week.
You got two guys battling it out in the newly established Big Ten, and we were talking about before, it's kind of our favorite conference to watch. You don't know who the top dog is yet, and you kind of think you figure it out. It might be Maryland, and then Ohio State with an overtime winner off, a good possession, but probably not a scrappy goal, I would say. A scrappy goal.
Yeah, what you're seeing now in the lacrosse in college, you're seeing a lot of conferences starting to up their tournaments, and you're seeing higher seeded teams start battling out with the lower seeded teams, because those lower seeded teams are trying to fight to get either into the tournament or to fight to get a quality win to make sure that they can get a bid for the NCAA. So it's kind of like a pre-tournament aspect, even though they go in their conferences, but they're trying to fight for position polls in their conference tournament so that they get a good position to make it all the way to vouch for themselves to make it to the NCAAs.
Well, Maryland was one of the top one or two teams last week. I think they were number 2 behind Syracuse. They fall to 5 this week. Ohio State actually picked up a number 1 overall vote above Syracuse with that win. So, you talk about conference seeding, it could be pretty important once we get to tournament time. That's a huge win for them. I mean, we haven't gotten to the tournament, the Big Ten tournament or the conference tournaments, but monster win and in overtime, nonetheless, once you get into the tournament, and it's just minuscule, the differences between some of these top teams, that heart and that passion and kind of grinding out victories. I think they were down 5 or 6 goals or something like that during the game. It's a huge win. It's a scrappy win, and it's definitely got them. I was hooked when we talked to Coach Myers in episode 3. I know you and I were talking off air how much we liked him and how much we'd play for him, but he's got those guys cooking right now.
I was actually flying to my game on Saturday, and I had a layover in Atlanta, and I landed in Atlanta. I got to my gate, and I saw Tucker Durkin there, a fellow teammate of mine. And
decent player.
I guess he's pretty good, huh? And we're like, have you checked the scores? And before I took off from Atlanta, we looked at the scores, and we saw that Maryland was up about 5 or 6 goals. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, all right, maybe they are making a stamp for themselves that they are the number 1 or number 2 seed. And by the time we landed, the game was over, and it was overtime. And I was weird. Tucker and I looked at each other like, whoa, that quick of a flight. It was a 45-minute to an hour flight. That quickly it changed, and Ohio State came out on top. And after watching the replay, it was the luck of the draw, hitting the pipe, bouncing back off the backside, and the guy being smart, picking it up and shooting and scoring right away and putting it in the back of the net. But when you look at these top 5 rankings, I really, truly think that these are going to be completely different come tournament time. You have Syracuse at number 1, Denver at number 2, Ohio State at number 3, Duke at number 4, and Maryland at number 5. And the round up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you got Notre Dame, Albany, Hopkins, Hofstra, and Penn State. Without a doubt, this is all going to change drastically towards the tournament time, because all these teams are going to have to play each other in conference play, and with a loss, they can either easily drop 1 or they can drop 3, depending on who wins their conferences and who can bump up above everybody else.
Well, you know what I would agree with that, first of all, and I would put those bottom 10 teams on notice that if they want to crack the top 10, they should probably come on the Getaway Podcast, because we've had Denver, Ohio State, and Hofstra on, all top 10 teams, and all flying right now. So, those of you coaches listening, feel free to give us a call. Shoot us a little email. We'll get you on here. We'll get your team rolling. But an exciting weekend, and that wasn't the only good game. I mean, there were other good games that, some of those ones where you're just flipping through the channel and you're like, oh, Albany Yale will be a pretty good game. Yeah, awesome game. 13-12 final. Albany pulls it out. I know a lot of people were kind of expecting Yale to win that one. I saw some of the pregame analysis, and they thought that Yale's hitting stride right here. Maybe they'd be able to pull that one out against Albany, but that young face-off guy up there has just been an animal, and it's hard to beat an offense that just can't stop scoring. Notre Dame, North Carolina, another one. North Carolina really needed that win to kind of solidify themselves. I think now they're going to have to win the ACC tournament to get into the NCAAs.
They are the 4 seed and have to face Syracuse first round.
Yeah, tough. And I want to say they're just about 500. I think the rule for the NCAA, just like a bowl game, you have to be above 500. So right now they're 6-7. You need to be above 500 to get an at-large bid. So they kind of need to, or they have to win the ACCs. Syracuse, tough one too against Binghamton. There's no easy games anymore.
No, not at all. Especially that was Syracuse's senior day, and I'm sure all you listeners out there that ever had to go through senior day, it's a very emotional time knowing that is one of your last, if not second to last game if you make it to the playoffs and get a home round advantage. But it's a very emotional game for those seniors. And, Binghamton being 45 minutes down the road from Syracuse, they came up and gave them a good fight.
And then the last one to round it up for the men's side, Rutgers dropping to Penn State. Penn State won at 13-7. It was another battle of the borderline top 10s, 10-12, depending on what poll you're looking in. But Rutgers, man, they go from the number 1 overall seed. They just kind of start losing some close games here or there. Really, really needed that one. And selfishly, I was hoping to see them win that game against Penn State and really solidify themselves. But it's gonna be a tough road for them now to make the tournament.
Well, I think the big game this weekend is Hopkins, Maryland.
Yeah,
and I don't know what that justifies for Rutgers, but if Hopkins were to beat Maryland, I think that bumps Rutgers out automatically, or Rutgers is already out of the tournament. So they need to get a win and or hope that somebody else wins or loses to hopefully squeak into the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, they play Ohio State this weekend, and Ohio State, that's obviously a huge win, but Penn State is playing Michigan, and right now they're the only other team with 2 wins in the conference. So if you want to crack those top 4, you're going to really need to hope to get some help there for Michigan beating Penn State, and Rutgers is going to need to knock off Ohio State. Definitely doable. I mean, Michigan was a top 20 team at one point this year. Definitely
doable.
And then on the women's side, guys, we'll jump over. Another another game of parity. The women's game is just like the men's game. Maryland just squeaking by Penn State. Penn State's a top 5 team in the women's NCAA rankings, but 16-14, sorry. Great win for Maryland, really nailing down that number 1 seed in everyone's eyes. I think they're the only ones getting votes for the number 1 seed at this point. But UNC and Florida are coming on strong right behind them. You got UNC with their only loss to Maryland early, and they nailed down the number 1 seed for the ACC tournament. And Florida, only 2 losses, Maryland and UNC. So they're in second place, and the top 3 are Maryland, Florida, UNC. Maryland really needs to win this weekend against Northwestern. They're the perennial favorite. About 5-6 years ago, I feel like they had 6 in a row or something incredible. They just couldn't lose. So that's one of those programs with a lot of pride and tradition. Wouldn't be surprised to see them knock off Maryland, but at this point, Maryland is just cooking, just rolling right now. Hey, Bartholomew Chambers VII, why weren't you at practice today?
My stupid sister took her Range Rover and ran over all my equipment.
Even your helmet?
Everything.
Oh, man. Well, you got to go to laxworld.com and type in code BAGPOD, get all new equipment, free shipping, no minimum.
Mom, let's go to laxworld.com.
Use code BAGPOD, BAGPOD. Free shipping, no minimum. That's laxworld.com. So anyways, guys, this week we have the privilege of having a Super Bowl champion on Begataway Podcast, but not just a Super Bowl American. He was Super Bowl American. He was not only a Super Bowl champion, but he was an All-American in college as well. He was a stud athlete, big guy, 6'5", 6'6". And we're going to dive into kind of his past and how he played two sports, and how he sees the game of lacrosse developing, and where it's going in the future. As well as his football, obviously. We're going to break down a little Tom Brady talk.
And even turned down Bill Tierney at Princeton because he wanted to play two sports.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Both of us were two-sport athletes. I had the privilege of playing both at the Division II level. I played soccer and lacrosse. You were probably kicking yourself for not playing soccer at Syracuse. I know you said that's one of your regrets. But I'm a firm believer in playing two sports. And you don't have to play them at the college level, but I'm a firm believer in playing two sports, in high school or growing up playing four sports, playing baseball, playing football, playing basketball. I think you kind of bring different things to it, to different sports. The field sense of soccer relates to, the positioning and field sense of lacrosse, and basketball, watching somebody come off a pick and hitting a pass. It's stuff you learn at a young age, and I think it really correlates to different sports.
We discussed about in episode 3 about being a two-sport athlete, and kids these days, or players these days, that focus on one sport have a tendency to die out just a little bit quicker than those that play multiple sports. And I feel like the reason why that is that when I was in soccer, I loved playing soccer. I devoted my game to soccer. And when I got home from soccer practice, I would pick up a lacrosse stick. But I was focused mostly on soccer at that time, and I knew I could still play lacrosse, but just by playing in my backyard. And then when soccer ended, my focus was just nothing but lacrosse. And I can focus on lacrosse. And when I come home from lacrosse practice, granted, I'll probably still play soccer and lacrosse, but I was able to fall back in love with the game and not have to burn out early because this is something I've been doing for all fall and winter. So it's nice to know when I was playing that I can be competitive in a different sport. It's going to make me not only become more athletic, become more conditioned, and overall become a competitor in a different aspect of a game. And then when I got to lacrosse, my conditioning was outstanding. My field vision was great, and I just need to know how to just play lacrosse at that level, and I just continue to grow. And what I was able to do is I was able to combine the two sports and be as successful as I possibly can and have that drive and not being burnt out at an early age.
Yeah, you know what? I heard some orthopedics talking too. There's two trains of thought that I think really interest me in the two sport, three sport debate. And one of them, I've heard orthopedics say playing one sport puts stress on certain muscles. So if you're playing basketball and you get a lot of jumping, a lot of quick stop, start and go, and you're playing football, the contact and upper body strength on the line, and you start to strengthen different muscles that actually help strengthen the muscles you use in other sports. So, if you're getting that lateral ability, maybe it helps strengthen your hip flexors, and it in turn will help your quick bursts in lacrosse. And when you focus on one sport, you tend to be a little bit more injury prone because you're not really exercising those other muscles, which I think is a really interesting conversation. The other one is, a lot of people say, hey, I play two sports and this is great. And I really like playing two sports. But one of the big things is the competitiveness. And you talk about in the off season, you love playing soccer. I love playing soccer. I love playing basketball. When you're doing one sport and your season's in the spring, that's 3 seasons of off-season play. You show up on a Saturday and you're a gamer for your out-of-season, team or your trainings. It's fun. It's exciting, but it's not the same passion as is that you're playing in a game. You go to play a soccer game, it counts. It's for the standings. It's for the state tournament, or it's for your club championship, and that passion is easily rolled over to your new sport. And when something's on the line, being a 2 or 3 sport athlete, you're always competing for something and you're not always just practicing.
Well, here's another thing is that when we were kids growing up, I was kicked out of my house just because I was driving my parents crazy, and I had to figure out to do something. And I'll get all my buddies in the neighborhood together. We would play street hockey. It'll be basketball. It'll be home run derby. It'll be wiffle ball. It's getting your buddies together and playing in a competitive atmosphere. My old boss and good friend Spencer Ford at 3D, we used to discuss the Sandlot routine. The movie Sandlot, for those that haven't watched it, it's one of the greatest sports movies ever.
Forever.
S'more what? I can have a s'more or something when I have nothing at all. But these kids grow up just playing baseball, and they build their own baseball field and their own hangout area, and that's the whole moral of the story is being able to get up and play baseball. And if you hit a home run, you gotta be worried about the beast over on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
But these kids will get together, and that's the mentality that these guys need. I mean, players these days need to have. Is like, if you ask kids these days if they play a pickup game of anything, I guarantee you about 20% of those kids in a classroom of 20 will only raise their hand. I mean, that's bad. You should have all kids raise their hands and be like, yeah, I play this, I do that. And
Pickup game of Halo?
Yeah, they play Xbox or PS4 or whatever it is. I used to go on my pedal bike and ride my bike for 4 hours and just put on tunes.
Is a pedal bike like a normal bike? What is that?
It's a bicycle, guy.
Oh, I thought you were talking about one of those ones from like Modern Family where you're like running in a pedals. Yeah, it's a Chicago thing. Never heard of it.
It's a pedal bike. Yeah, I get on a pedal bike. You know, it has pedals. You have to pedal.
You know, I get it. I just feel like a bike has pedals. You just say bike.
I used to go stir crazy when I stood still for too long. And, you know, I encourage you guys to find buddies. If it's your brother or your sister, compete with them. If it's yourself, try to see if you can compete with yourself. See how fast you can run up the stairs. Seeing how fast you can run around the house. Make yourself competitive as much as you possibly can. If you are walking in a hallway, right, and you realize you see somebody in your same class, beat them to that classroom. Beat them to somewhere else. If you have a
full contact.
Yeah, full contact. Without a doubt. Book bag ripped, books all over the place. Gotcha, winner. Start making yourself more competitive, because if you find yourself just playing one sport and you find yourself pulling away from that love of the game, you got to find another edge that's going to make you fall in love with that thing and get back to the groove that you want to become. Because ideally, if you really want to play this sport at the next level, whether it be soccer, basketball, volleyball, hockey, you got to buy into the grind. And that grind is doing anything and everything at all costs to make yourself be the best that you possibly can be.
And you know what? It's not too late to fall in love with the game. We've had a blast on Twitter. Look us up, Getaway Podcast. But, you know, some of the people on Twitter have been talking to us. Hey, you know, we just started listening to the podcast. We love it. Started watching some of the games, and we're falling in love with it. And two of them are dads, one of which, Ron DiRenzo down in Florida, said he started checking out some of the local high school games and absolutely loves it. He called that the Ohio State win this weekend on Twitter, which I thought was awesome. After a couple weeks,
come to the Florida launch game.
Yeah, go to the Florida launch game.
I'll leave you tickets.
And the other one, Eric Finley, reached out to us and said that he's really fallen in love with the game, and he actually started helping out at his son's high school practice, which is super cool. I mean, the coach is letting him run some drills, and he's really falling in love with lacrosse. I think Ron DiRenzo had mentioned to us that he has 4-year-old nephews, and he went out and bought him fiddlesticks. And he's really upset that there's not enough gear for him. He wants to learn where the good lacrosse gear is because he wants a hat. So we'll have to give him a shout. But yeah, you know, it's never too late to fall in love with the game, guys. And like Brooksy was saying, it doesn't have to be a certain aspect of the game. You just have to find something that you're passionate about, and, you know, go out and hit 5 pipes before you go inside, or challenge yourself. You know, try to hit 2 corners. But yeah, you know what? We're going to dive into the interview right now. Another guy that's super passionate about lacrosse, Chas Gessner. Excuse the noise and the hissing in the background, but we were actually recording right before we played a game against Spencer Ford. Now that Brooksy mentioned them, but we were coaching a high school game and actually recorded in the AD's office. Anytime, any place, man. We're trying to get this podcast out. So here it is. Enjoy the interview. All right, we're here with Chas Gessner, the original Chris Hogan, as I like to call him. Super Bowl champion and 2-sport All-American at Brown, where he was a lacrosse player and a football player. Went on to play for the New England Patriots, 2003 Super Bowl. Went on to play after that with the Berlin Thunder. And I believe you were a All-World, or how do they call it, All-NFL Europe. Then he played with the Jets. All-World sounds pretty cool.
All world. We'll stick with that.
And then he played with the Jets, with the Bucks, and then he went and played with the Orlando Predators, Seahawks, Florida Tuskers, Spokane Shock, Virginia Destroyers. You played for a long time. You would have had like 10-year career, 9-year career.
Yeah, it was, I guess maybe 7 years, 7, 8 years. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on us. We're excited to talk football and kind of dive into your history a little bit. Right out of the gate, what got you into lacrosse? What was that first experience?
You know, my dad had grown up playing lacrosse, and a couple of other members of my family, my cousins and uncles. I'm from Maryland originally, and my mom's from Annapolis. She played lacrosse, and so it was one of those things. I played baseball for my school, and my school didn't have a lacrosse team. But as soon as I had a chance to go and play for a club team, I instantly gave up baseball and just jumped right into it.
So were you always two sport, three sport? When did you kind of whittle it down?
I grew up. I grew up with basketball was my number one thing. I went to all the summer camps and did all the stuff with basketball, and it was basketball, soccer, and lacrosse. And I didn't even end up getting into football. I didn't even play football until I got to high school, and I just gave up soccer to play football.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
What any sport? Was it just the speed? Is that kind of what drew you to all those different sports and saw success?
Was it the speed of the game?
No, of you. I feel like you need something to translate. You have to be an athlete, but I feel like the speed would directly, translate to all those sports.
I've been called a lot of things in my career, but I don't think speedy
I don't know if you play wide receiver in the NFL, you have to have a little bit of speed. I'm running like a 5.5 these days.
I guess it's all relative. I being in that world, I always felt like the big slow dumb animal around all those guys. But yeah, I was always able to kind of I grew like just steadily and slowly, and because of that, instead of hitting a big growth spurt, I ended up being 6'6" about, but instead of hitting a big growth spurt and I think getting stuck playing like center on the basketball team or, some other positions that didn't force me to develop my athleticism as much.
Yeah.
I played point guard. I played shooting guard. I was an attackman. I was a center midi playing soccer. So I think I just was able to develop that athleticism. And then when I started growing into my size, I was able to kind of mix that with athleticism, and I think that gave me a little bit more of an edge.
Now, as you got towards your junior and senior year, what was the recruiting process like for you? Were you getting recruited for other sports other than just lacrosse?
Yeah, I was getting recruited a little bit for football, but I kind of made it clear that I didn't really want to play Division I football. And I don't really know why, to be honest. I think I knew some friends that had graduated and went on to play Division I college football, and it just seemed like it was their whole life playing football. And to me, the idea of giving up lacrosse to make football my whole life wasn't something that I was into. So I was just planning on going to college and playing lacrosse, and got recruited by schools like Penn State and Notre Dame and North Carolina, but then it wasn't until late in the game, late in the recruiting game, was my first semester of my senior year. Some of the Ivy League schools started coming around and saying that, hey, you have a chance to play both sports, and you can sneak in the back door of one of these great schools using sports to kind of get in. So that became more and more of a reality. And the more I looked at it, it was a really, really tough decision because I had always wanted to go to North Carolina and play lacrosse, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it just kind of came down to it at the last minute. It was like, I really can't pass up the opportunity to go to an Ivy League school and not have to give up either one of these sports and just kind of give that a go.
What was that like doing, playing two sports is draining enough, academically and time-wise and physically. What was it like doing that at such a prestigious school? I can imagine the curriculum and the workload at Brown was pretty brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. Looking back on it, I have no idea how I pulled it off, to be honest. But when you're doing it, you just kind of do it. And that, for me, it was like it was just my reality. So I didn't really have anything else to compare it to necessarily, and I didn't really allow myself to, kind of, I don't know, romanticize what it would be like if I wasn't doing that. For me, that was awesome. I was all about playing games. And so if I, was going to have to sit out an entire spring of football where I wasn't going to be able to play games. Wow, I can play lacrosse in games in the spring and pull that off, and that made it all worth it to me.
Can't argue that. Well, in the fall, I mean, getting a little bit into your football, I think your claim to fame, you tied Jerry Rice for most catches in a game. I was reading an article that you were really bitter after the game because you dropped like a 12-yard out. Was it 24 catches?
It wasn't a 12-yard out. It was a bomb down the
Oh, no. Oh, so I'd be bitter too.
Yeah.
It was a sure touchdown. It was another like 60 yards or 65 yards, something like that. It went right through my hands. Yeah, those are those ones. You still like wake up in the middle of the night like, oh.
I could have broken Jerry Rice's record.
Well, you know what? You might have gotten drafted by a nubby team at that point, but instead you ended up going undrafted. And you went to the Patriots and won a Super Bowl. So I feel like it worked out.
Yeah, let's look at it that way.
So what? Tell us a little bit about that experience. You're getting in there, early into the Patriots' legendary run here, and that was Brady's first, right? 2003.
It was his second, I think.
Oh, second. Okay.
2002.
Yeah, it was his second. So it was still right there at the beginning of it. He had just prior to that come in for Drew Bledsoe and like kind of taken over and won. It was interesting. I was right before the whole wave of receiving tight ends. So for me, I was kind of like a tweener. I wasn't going to be able to put on 65 pounds and put my hand in the dirt and play tight end like you had to do at that time. But I was a bigger, slower wide receiver, relatively speaking. So Charlie Weiss, who was there at the time, kind of saw the opportunity to use me in like kind of a hybrid type of way, which was before anybody was really doing that. So he gave me a shot, and unfortunately, I got hurt in training camp there. I pulled my hamstring off the bone.
Wow.
So it really set me back, and I was doing really well, and I think I actually had a shot at making the team, and they had seen enough in me to keep me around even after I got injured. So I ended up sticking around. And then we just went on that deep run. We won like 16 games straight or something like that. And it was a pretty incredible thing to be a part of and experience.
Where do you keep that Super Bowl ring?
I keep it in a safe deposit box now, but believe it or not, I used to have it just like in my sock drawer for a while. My dad had it for a while.
We were just talking about Kraft's first one. Brooks hadn't heard the story. Have you heard who has Kraft's first Super Bowl ring?
Doesn't like Vladimir Putin?
Yes. Yeah, Vladimir Putin has it. We were just talking about that. I mean, that's something you got to get back. I feel like you write him a letter, you email. Well, you probably just write it on your own computer and he reads it. So
right, he reads it as you type it. So, did you ever have conversations with Belichick about lacrosse? I mean, he's a huge lacrosse advocate, and I know his son played lacrosse. I actually played against his son when we played Rutgers. He stripped me. He went over my head and actually took the ball away from me. But you guys ever talk lacrosse? Because he's from Annapolis, and he's a huge lacrosse advocate, like I just said. So it's like he loves drafting lacrosse players.
Absolutely, yeah. We actually, my mom went to the same. My mom went to Annapolis High.
Get out!
Oh, okay.
His sister, or no, I'm sorry. My mom's sister was in high school with Belichick, so we had talked about that connection, and then we used to always talk about his son and how he was coming up playing lacrosse, and Belichick was just a strange guy. Like I could have a conversation with him about lacrosse, and we could be talking about his son and this, that, and the other, and then I could walk by him in the hallway 3 hours later, and he would just not even look at me like he'd never met me before.
That's wild. I was telling Brooks, I said, I can't imagine where he got his wardrobe from. Being a preppy guy out of Annapolis, you'd expect some pastels, and he's cutting sleeves and wearing jorts.
Yeah, a little bit of a flair. A little bit of South Shore flair.
So let's talk a little bit about NFL Europe. I mean, obviously it's dissipated, but at the time that was hot. I mean, you were all Europe, all world, as we like to call it. That's one of the expansion ideas that they keep talking about in the NFL. Do you see that as a viable option for the NFL? I mean, I think the travel is crazy, But do you think that's a place that they may end up? Whether it be London or Berlin or wherever they end up.
That was an amazing experience, and it would blow your mind how much of a fan base there is over there for it. I mean, we would play in these big soccer stadiums that hold 150,000 people, and we wouldn't fill them up or anything, but there was a lot of people there, and it was a pretty big deal around Germany, especially. But I just like you mentioned the travel thing. I don't know how you could possibly get around that. I mean, it's hard enough as it is to go East Coast to West Coast,
right?
For a game,
Yeah.
I don't see how they could bridge that gap. I could see how they could get down into Mexico City, and
That makes more sense.
Spread it there. But I don't see how that could work logistically. I mean, it makes sense money wise and all that kind of publicity wise and everything. But I just, from a player's standpoint, expecting I don't think the players union will ever really let that take hold.
It's almost as if you have to fly there 2 weeks prior before your game to get acclimated with everything, right?
Yeah. And how do you do that? How do you and that's a lot. Especially you're in season and you're dealing with things, and you got the altitude also, and you got injuries, and you got. I mean, that's the facilities, and that's a lot of stuff.
Oh, that's true. And that's your home base. If your home base is Berlin and you're playing 8 games on the road, I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah, I don't see that.
No, you're right. I love the idea. I'm with you. As an outsider,
idea,
I think it's kind of cool, but it's definitely tough. So, who do you think in today's game would, today's NFL would make for a good lacrosse player? We always say cornerbacks or a wide receiver like yourself. Is there any one specific guy that you feel, Chris Hogan aside, that you think may be, kind of a special player on a lacrosse field?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's those guys, like it's the receivers, like maybe even slot receivers, like Edelman and Amendola.
Yeah,
are good buddies of mine. Danny can throw a little bit, but I'd imagine Julian. Probably is pretty good and would be really, really good.
Well, you got drafted by the Bayhawks, right?
Yeah, that was a weird thing too. Actually, that the way that unfolded is I had been in Tampa, and I can't remember his name, but I was at the time Joey Galloway, who was a receiver with me in Tampa Bay. His agent was a coach for the Los Angeles team.
Wow, get out!
Wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, just randomly, his name's eluding me. I can't believe I can't remember his name. But he had contacted me and said, "Oh, through Joey, I've heard about you and I've watched games and blah blah blah, and I know you're a great lacrosse player. I have this idea. If you end up not playing football next year, I had just gotten cut for like the 17th time by Tampa Bay. If you end up not playing next year, I'd love if you entered into the supplementary player draft into the pool, and then we're going to draft you. We have like the number 6th pick or something like that overall, and we'll draft you, and then we'll just have your rights. And then if you want to play, you can play. If not, no big deal. And then we kind of went back and forth, and I developed a little bit of relationship with him, and good guy. And the idea sounded kind of cool. It was cool. Maybe I get a chance to go back and play lacrosse again if the football thing doesn't work out. And then one of the coaches from LA went to the Baltimore Bayhawks and basically stole this guy's idea and snaked him and drafted me ahead of LA.
Yeah, second.
The number 2 pick.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I had never talked to anybody from Baltimore before that day ever. They called me up, and the guy that I had been talking to from LA, had said, "Hey, these guys screwed me. They stole my idea. They drafted you, blah blah blah, whatever." And so when they called, I was just kind of like, "You guys, that was messed up." I never talked to you guys. I never expressed any interest in playing there. And even though in the back of my head that would have been really cool, that's kind of hometown, whatever. And
yeah,
it just didn't pan out anyway. I ended up continuing to play football, but that was an interesting experience.
Must be pretty cool to say that you played professional football and that you got drafted to play professional lacrosse at the same
Like a
time.
Deion Sanders.
Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, technically when you were playing both football and lacrosse, that was like you know, you don't see it that much often these days, kids playing two sports, because God forbid, I don't know how these guys will be able to do it now. But
Yeah.
back then, I mean, like, you're a true old school. Like, that is the way athletes should be. You should be allowed to play two sports and excel at it. And you're able to excel at both sports. Why not, right?
I agree. I think it's a shame how specialized everything has gotten. I mean, it's obviously a natural evolution as everybody gets better and bigger, faster, stronger. But it's a shame because there was so many elements of my game as it related to football that came from lacrosse and vice versa. Football is very much scripted. You have a certain route to run. If you see a certain thing, you're going to convert it to this, you're going to convert it to that. You're processing defenses. You have to be in the right place at the right time. And that's great and operating within that confine. But lacrosse was so much more creative and kind of free flowing, and you had offensive sets and stuff, but there was so much more opportunity to freestyle and kind of, create different things on the fly. And that was the perfect mixture for me, and that was my yin and my yang as far as sports were concerned. And it was incredible to be able to have both of those things balance each other out. And it is a shame that it's moving, that sports are moving away from that now.
Oh, it's a total shame. I mean, I was just telling Gary on the way to school today to come coach that looking back, I really wish I did play soccer for at least 1 year at Syracuse. I had an opportunity, but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on lacrosse and trying to do that. But looking back, I was like, man, what was I thinking? I definitely should have played two sports and just say that I would have done it, but it would have helped me overall. Like growing up, soccer was my main sport and lacrosse was just for fun until I fell in love with it. But playing soccer at center mid, I was able to run all over the place. So when I got in lacrosse season, I was not only in tip top shape, but then my footwork was just above and beyond everybody else's, and that really helped me excel. And it's kind of like in football too, what I think is like a wide receiver or a tight end. When you make that first move, or you're trying to make a split dodge, or you're trying to make a type of roll dodge, that imitates a lot of football and how wide receivers, if you're trying to get jammed and that defender approaches you in lacrosse, you got to have quick feet to make the right move to get off. And that correlates a lot to football, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't, and and I say I love playing in games, and I said that earlier, but really, you can't imitate that. You can't mimic that in practice. So if I went and I just in an off season and I was trying to imitate like getting jammed, or being able to try to develop that like spatial relationship of like where somebody is and what I can get away with and what I can't, and what things work and what things don't, you can't develop that just training or just in practice, really.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely, like that one thing definitely was responsible for the other. It was just like it's just another opportunity for that to continue to develop.
And this, I mean, to go off of that, it's kind of sad now that like there's a lot of lacrosse players that are quitting their fall sports just to focus on lacrosse year round. And
Right.
I keep trying to tell these kids, stop doing that. Try to play other sports. Fall in love with something else, so when the lacrosse season comes by, you're falling back in love with the sport. And what you're starting to see, these high school kids and even youth kids are starting to focus year round with lacrosse, and they get burnt out so quickly. And by the time they reach their sophomore or junior year, they're saying, oh, I'm not getting recruited. I'm just going to quit playing sports all in general. And it's sad to see. And like, it's great to have you on our podcast to discuss like playing football and lacrosse and being an All-American in college and playing professionally in football, and how that correlates to each other and making you the person that you are today and being that athlete and that superstar. And it's really important for us to make sure our listeners listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I strongly encourage it. And I don't know where that came from for me. I don't know if it was just me being stubborn and saying, hey, I've decided that I'm going to do this and I'm going to stick to it. But, I think that's important. It's important for kids to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I can remember going and visiting Princeton and I visited with the football team, and then I went and visited with Coach Tierney. And he said, I think you're a great player. Would love to have you here, but I gotta be honest with you. The other guys that are going to be here, they're going to be playing in the fall. They're going to be playing fall ball. They're going to be together, and I can't guarantee that if you're going to miss that you're ever going to be able to catch up or be on the same level with those guys.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I just like I understood that. Like that makes sense. I get that, and I understand that. But it was just kind of like I just had in my head like that's not true.
Right.
I'll prove that wrong, and I'll just do that. And then when Coach Lasagna was at Brown at the time, Peter Lasagna, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't care. Sure, go play football. Like that's great. We'll love to have you in the spring." And he was just totally nonchalant about it and cool about it, and it worked out great. And I just wish that there wasn't so much pressure from the top, from parents, from coaches, from schools, from all that kind of thing to pigeonhole kids.
Absolutely. So did you have a chip on your shoulder when you played Princeton?
I think a little bit. I don't know. I think by then it was just like I was just trying to compete. I was just trying to. I don't know, and I don't think so really, to be honest, because I got it. I understood what he was saying, and at the time, like Princeton was #1 in the country. So it was like, okay, well, this guy is obviously Coach Tierney. He's legendary. He knows what he's talking about. Maybe I just can't play with, maybe I can't play on this level, on that level. But yeah, we did fine. We did fine against Princeton.
So we wrap up our interviews with what we call a word generator. It's a machine that you type in how many words you want, and we go with 2. And you have to tell us whatever comes up, the first person that comes to mind, whether it's a teammate, a coach, a celebrity, whatever it is, a friend. So we're going to go ahead and hit our word generator. A diplomatic kidnapper. Is that somebody like talks you into being kidnapped?
Or that makes me think of someone that's very sneaky that likes to play practical jokes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I got a good one for this. So we were rookies together in New England, and then we went on to become best friends. And there's a guy named Cliff Kingsbury.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Quarterback out of Texas Tech, and he's one of my best friends now. But I always joke about it. You remember that movie back in the day called The Good Son? It was like Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood, and the family adopts Macaulay Culkin, and he pretends like he's this like really nice kid and lays it on super thick, but then behind closed doors he terrorizes.
Sounds like Macaulay Culkin.
I always call Cliff the good son because he like puts on this like Southern charm. He's the good, sweet Southern boy, but he's just got that diabolical side.
And it's working for him. He's killing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody thinks he's just this sweet Southern boy.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. That was great. I really think, just like Steven was saying, people are so stuck in their ways playing one sport and trying to specialize at 13, 14 years old, especially with the recruiting process the way it is now when you can commit at 14. I think it's great to hear your story and some of these other guys that have done it, have played multiple sports, and have found an avenue to do it and had success. So I really appreciate you coming on and look forward to talking to you again. I feel like you're definitely going to be a great asset for us when it comes to talking to these kids.
Absolutely, yeah, I really appreciate it. It was an honor to talk to you guys about it. And let me know, I mean, if there's any way that you guys can think of to kind of promote that in the game or just in youth sports in general, I'd love to help be a part of it and contribute in any way that I can, because I think that is important, and I'm glad you guys are preaching that.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Come in.
Oh, what's going on in your office? These lights are horrendous.
Yeah, I know. These flickering lights gave me 2 seizures last week.
Well, why don't you change them?
My boss is too cheap.
Too cheap? For what? They're so cheap now. You should just get LEDs.
Where can I get those?
It's called Bridget Partners. Bridget Partners is an American LED distributor who will set you up with some perfect lights for your office. No problem. Just give a call to 703-713-5209, and they'll help you out. Tell them Begataway Podcast sent you.
Hey, Carl. Thank you, Chas Gessner, for coming on and telling your unbelievable story about being a college athlete, two-sport athlete, and even a Super Bowl champ.
Yeah, that was awesome. And, hopefully next week, guys, we're going to have another awesome interview for you. We're going to try to stay in touch with Chas. That was so good. We talked to him a little bit off air. Hopefully we can get him on for a little football talk or a little two-sport athlete talk again soon. For those of you guys that want to follow us, Begataway Pod on Twitter, Begataway Podcast on Instagram, and begatawaypodcast@gmail.com if you want to shoot us an email. Next week's guest will be on Wednesday, and we'll have a little recap for you, and we'll dive into some of the conference tournaments. And one last thing, shout out to Michael B1212 on Instagram for winning the stick. Really excited to get that out to him, and hopefully he'll shoot us a little Instagram picture back when he gets his package.
Whoa, wait.
What?
Snapple fact of the day.
Ooh.
Peaches are members of the almond family.
Weird. Let's go for another one.
Bees are born fully grown.
That's kind of weird if you think about it. Let's do another one. Let's do two more.
Oh, God, I gotta waste all my Snapple packs. The first spam message was transmitted over telegraph wires in 1864.
Let's end on a good one.
Mangoes have noses. What?
That's weird.
Thanks for ruining my 6-pack of Snapple I just got at the grocery store.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Have a good one.